Alright, welcome into my 76 Argosy. Now, most of you guys know about this trailer, but if you're new to the channel, I've been restoring this for about a year now. Today, we're doing a dedicated build video on just the trim out of these Vista windows. I'm going to start rolling out dedicated videos on certain aspects of the interior of the trailer. Built the rear bed. I've got an entire build video just for that, and this is going to be happening well. Now, this was intended to be a full build video, but it morphed into a prototype video because I really complicated this thing and made it super difficult. So basically what we're doing is I'm going to make an aluminum shroud that goes up in the wall that holds a sunshade, an aluminum sunshade that slides up and down. You can close this off, kill the sun. Also, we've got to make a wooden trim ring that closes in this wall space, makes it look nice and clean, and put an aluminum shroud on the outside because this is pretty gnarly looking, just a bad cutout. Originally, it had a plastic shroud with a sunshade in there. It was really junky. The plastic was all broken. The shades didn't work at all. So those are in the trash. We're going to just get as complicated as we can and just try to build our own really nice wood and aluminum shade trim. Now I want to say real quick, thanks to Inventables for making the X cards. It's CNC that I use in the shop, and we're going to be featuring that in this video. I'm going to be doing a lot of CNC work on getting the radius, the curve of the window, jigs for the kerf bending on the wood, all kinds of cool stuff. So let's just jump right in and get started on this build. Okay, before we start cutting, let me turn the music off. Okay, before we start cutting material, first thing I want to do is kind of make a template of the profile of the window. So you can see here in SketchUp, I've started doing that. I basically am making a guess at these corner radiuses. I think I'm pretty close. What I'm going to do now is mill up a piece of MDF into a real thin, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and set it up on the CNC and cut out this curved profile, and then we'll set it up on the window and see exactly how it fits. And if it doesn't fit quite right, we can come back into SketchUp and make just a few adjustments that we need to make. Let me get this deleted out. So there you go. You can see that's what we're going to make right there. Let me get rid of my guides. Basically, that's this shroud. So this will be the piece that sits on the actual window frame. And we're just gonna send this over to Xcarve, cut it real quick in that MDF, and put it up there and see how it fits. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out here is that this workpiece is actually maxing out the table size that I have on the Xcarve. You can see that it's actually hanging off the front, and I've measured back 2 inches in right to the edge of my carving to home the machine at that 2-inch line. That way I have as much of the actual carving on the work table, so I get all the length of those rails. There's a level of excitement here as I round that back corner, because at this point I'm unsure if it's going to make it. I'm a little bit worried that it's going to hit the back of the rails and not go make the corner and not cut the profile, which would cause some problems and make it a little bit more difficult to make this. Yes! Made it! Okay, so now that we've rounded that corner, let's talk a little bit about this Xcarve. Now, my workflow for this is I draw in SketchUp. SketchUp has a plugin that exports my SketchUp file as an SVG file, which is a scalable vector graphic. And once you get it into Easel, you have a lot of control over what you do. You can change the shape of it, you can change how it cuts, you can clear out a pocket, or what we're going to do here is cut inside our line. You can change where it sits on your material. You just have a wide range of control within Easel, and you can also design within Easel as well. One thing I like about Easel is you can simulate the cut, so it shows your toolpath on the right. That way I know where to put my hold downs. Otherwise, there's a good chance that you're going to run your tooling right through a hold down, which I've done several times. So that's what I love about Easel, is it just simplifies the CNC process. Okay, so we pull that off, and then we're going to check the fit here and see how it goes. Man, that is not perfect, but it's really close. Okay, so I hit it on the first try, which is always good. You can see it's a little bit tight here, but I can actually slide it over. If we slide it all the way over, I think we're in a good spot. So this really worked out great. Okay, back into SketchUp. I want to try to explain this to you real quick because we're on our second carve. This, what you see, this inside line, this inside curve is that first original carve we did, the window opening, which worked beautifully. Everything is good on that. Now what we're going to do is I've drawn in this kind of track behind the window. It sets back 1/4 of an inch and it's 3/4 of an inch in width. And this is a form basically out of 3/4 plywood that is going to set a piece of kerf board. So we're going to use a piece of wood and kerf it and bend it into this shape. And then as it sets in this form that we're making, we'll Bondo it or use some kind of adhesive to lock it in place. The point of that board is to close in the wall space. So we have an 1.5 inch and 5/8 wall space. That's where our wires and insulation go. And we have to close that in. So we're using this board to do that. And it's obviously got to take the curve and shape of the window. Hopefully this will make more sense, and I think it will as we get further along in the build and you actually see these pieces get made and get used. Now another thing I love about having the CNC is it does work while I do work. So it's kind of like my shop buddy or my apprentice. It's not really apprentice, but it can work while I do work, which is nice. So while this is carving and making this little jig for our kerf board, we're going to work on actually making the kerf board. So I go to my table saw, I've milled out these parts. They're 3/4 of an inch thick. I think we're 1.25 inches wide and 40 inches long. And we're just kerfing out the middle area that bends. There's a long stretch of straight, obviously, that we just keep solid. This is a learning curve for me. I've made some kerf board, but it's been a long time. And basically, you're just trial and error right now. And you're going to see quite a bit of error before I figure out what the heck's going on with this. So on this second piece, I'm just trying something different. That's basically trial and error, like I said. And this is, I think I'm cutting, I raised the blade, cutting a little higher, getting a little bit thinner strip on top that hopefully will allow it to bend better. It's not going to work. One thing you're going to notice with this particular video is there was a lot of error, a lot of mistakes, a lot of figuring things out. And usually when that happens, the camera tends to be put on the back burner. So some of the filming is it's a little spotty, and I'm trying to explain my way through it because I think this is a valuable video to post regardless of the fact that there were some struggles. So we're going to jump ahead here, and I'm going to explain basically how I made this, how I eventually figured out how to make this work. Okay, so let's stop and take a quick look at where we're at with this. Now, it's taken me quite a few tries. As you saw, I started off using cypress, broke that, and switched over to hickory because hickory has much better bending capabilities. Hickory oak, species like that, walnut, cherry, all can bend well. This is hickory, and so this piece is just about there. It's a little bit broken, but what we're doing is basically drop it into the form, Bondo it. Once the Bondo sets, it's going to hold its shape just like this. Now this one, this one's not quite right. And I think the issue I'm having is my spacing on my kerfs are too far apart. There's a lot of just factors that go into kerf bending, and I haven't done a lot of it. So this is a little bit of a trial and error for me. You got to make a lot of mistakes before you figure it out. So I think I'm there. This is my newest piece. I've got way more kerfs in this one, as you can tell, and it feels like it's going to bend much better. The one good thing from this is that I know my jig is good. This process worked pretty good. And then when I drop it onto, this is the original template we cut for the window opening. I have the actual aluminum one on the CNC. It is finished cutting. This drops on and you get pretty much exactly a 1/4 inch reveal. Okay, so with the tighter kerfs, it worked really well. This actually bent much nicer. And the front face, sometimes you could feel little dimples in it. This actually was smooth all the way around. It's a little tricky getting it into that jig, but once you got it kind of set on top, you could hammer it down, seat it down in there real well. And then I come back with Bondo, and I'm basically going to Bondo in all those kerfs. Now that as well is something that I'm going to do differently in the future. The Bondo does a great job of holding the form, but there's no adhesion to the Bondo really. It doesn't stick to the wood very well, so eventually it kind of starts to pop loose. So when I build these for real, I'm going to use probably some kind of epoxy compound that I can put in there. I think I've already found what I need. That way it's not only holding that curve, but it's also adhering to the wood and creating a strong structure. So here's the great thing about the CNC in that jig we made is, like I said, it's exactly the halfway mark of this window trim. So all I got to do is set it on the table saw, get the blade right on the edge of that plywood, and cut off my piece, and it's the exact length I need. I'll make another one, and then we're going to glue them together. I just used the fest tool, put a couple dominoes in the end, and then I don't use clamps to put this together. I just use epoxy as my adhesive. It's a great gap filler. It's going to be nice and strong, and I can just set this down on my workbench and kind of manipulate them together how I want it. I want to make sure that my width is right because it wants to splay out a little bit. So I put a clamp across the middle to kind of pull it together, and it really, you can just kind of push it together. It would be very difficult to clamp. There are ways to do it, but just setting it together like this worked just fine for me, especially if you're using the epoxy because it's a solid adhesive. And I'm just eyeballing now kind of the straightness of it, and then take some measurements, make sure we're right where we need to be. Now while that dries, we're going to get into the sheet metal work. Now this is absolutely out of my comfort zone. I'm just figuring this out. Don't know anything about sheet metal work. So basically what we're doing is we're making a slide. So right now I'm making the actual part that catches the window screen to slide it. So basically I'm stacking two pieces on top of that aluminum sheet with the hole in it. One is about a ½ inch wide and one is about an inch wide, so it gives you a little slot in there for the screen to ride in. First mistake I'm making is right here as I drill these holes. For one, I don't have anything clamping it down. For two, I found when I drill the holes, it puts burrs on the other side of the metal, and so when I riveted them, it's actually not stitching it together at all. In some places it did. You'll see in the shot it looks pretty good, but throughout the length of the workpiece, there's little gaps, and those gaps are going to come back to haunt me. It's going to cause a lot of issues. So once I get that side riveted on, put my screen in, and then push the other side up against it, put some spring clamps on it, and do the exact same thing, rivet it down. And we're actually going to come back later in the video and redo this because this is not the right way to do it. Okay, so we got our trim ring ready, the epoxy dry. I'm just going to basically screw this on to this shroud I've made, this aluminum shroud. This is one issue we're going to have is this. There's a slight curve to the window because it's an Airstream in the curve, and this wood shroud is flat. We're going to have to fix that soon too. This is all kind of me figuring out as I go. I do put some washers in between the wood trim and the metal shroud. That's just so that the metal shade can slide in behind that wood trim, and we'll see if that works. Shade is not going to work. Just too much flex in there. It's too hard to pull on, too much flex on it. Okay, so here's what I got. I've got the wall cleat ghost. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the original opening is, it's just a really bad opening. We're going to fix that probably gonna have to cut it out a little bit bigger and then put another aluminum trim piece on this that will close in these gaps. That's the least of my problems right now. The shade doesn't work very well because the wood is binding it. The wood is straight and the wall's curved, the window's curved. So that's where the binding's happening. Also, the attachment I've used here is hitting, so that's sitting out a little too far. I'm just really close to scrapping this. I really am. I just don't know. I don't know if I'm ever gonna get it right. Cleco's popped out. You know, it's just not right. I don't know. Okay, first off, if you're gonna execute this and make this cut and build this, be careful. You need to be very cautious what you're doing here, where you're putting pressure, how you're feeding the piece. So just be careful. I've got the blade set to, I think, 6 degrees. So we're cutting a nice little bevel on the bottom of this to give it that kind of rounded shape. You can see right there how it kind of rocks. This ends up working pretty well, but it's going to take me a couple tries of fitting it on and off the camper to get the bevel dialed in right. Now there's other ways I could do this. I could sand it kind of round. If I was smart enough with the CNC, I could actually program my CNC to probably sculpt it round. Might take a while, but the beveling actually on the table saw worked pretty quick and easy. But here's the problem. As I mentioned earlier, the spacing on the slides, the gaps in there are going to start giving me problems, because every time I've taken this in and out and fitted it, it's kind of messed with it a little bit, and now it's just something's happened and it's just not sliding at all. It looks good, fits well, but the shade just does not function.
See how it slides. Come on, what is going on? It's worse. Why is it worse? When do you move? That's it. I'm done. No more. This is not happening. I tried. Unfortunately, I failed. Sucks. Wasted 2 days. Oh, man. Not sliding. This was sliding so much better.
Okay, so I think you could sense my frustration there. I just about gave up at this point. I mean, I really almost scrapped it. This was the last thing I tried. I thought, you know what? I should take it apart and redo the slides. And this is how I did them, and I think this is amazing how it made all the difference. I basically took it all apart, sanded the slides, got all the burrs off, got them smooth, Clecosed them all in so it clamped it tight down, and basically pulled the Clecos out, riveted it, did that whole process, and it put it on there perfectly. They were sandwiched together really well. I will say that I'm using too long of rivets. That's all I had left, so I just went with it. And this came to me at the very end. I thought, well, I have some grease. Why don't we just grease up these slides, help lubricate it, help it move a little bit. And it ended up just working beautifully. And you can see in the video how just excited I am that it actually worked. This is me being excited.
Wow. The beauty of grease. It works. Oh my gosh. Works beautifully. That grease is all it needed. Oh. Let's go put it in. Okay, so here it is. About 90% of the way done. Still has some issues. Now you can see I went ahead and added this front shroud to cover up this nasty cutout.
Still haven't attached it yet. I need the proper size rivets. I totally ran out of rivets. So it's basically held up with Clecos. This looks sloppy right now, but when you get it all, when I get this all riveted down, it's going to flush up pretty good. And I'm not going to worry about a little bit of a gap here between the wood and the outside wall. It just doesn't bother me. And like I said, once I rivet this, it's not going to look that bad. It's kind of why I left this shroud inside of the metal a little bit, just to kind of conceal it, hide it. You're going to be able to look in there a little bit, but I don't think it looks bad. And to make it conform and fit to the curve of the wall is just another aspect to complicate this that I'm just not going to worry about. So the sunshade, it works pretty good. This is just a makeshift handle that, I mean, it's a lot of effort. So that's just a makeshift handle. I mean, it's just still a little bit tricky. It's binding less on the wood now. So I'm not exactly sure at this point what the best thing to do is, because it really glides well, but it takes too much force. It takes too much effort to close it. I can do it, but my wife unfortunately would not be able to do it. Neither would my kids. So it just needs, I need to find where it's binding, work on it, but I think I'm there. I think it looks good. The wood trim, we're going to do a little bit of work. Replace the Bondo with a more stout epoxy adhesive in those Kerfs, so it's stronger, because this thing, I wouldn't put it in the trailer now. This is strictly a prototype, because it's pretty beat up from being in and out, in and out. I'm pretty happy with this. This was a struggle. I spent 3 full days getting to this point, and I almost threw in the towel multiple times, as I mentioned. So I'm just happy to have this here. I'm going to take a little break from it. We're going to follow up in one of the vlogs and get all of them installed once I kind of dial this in. And I'm going to provide plans for these. So once I figure it all out, I'm going to draw it up nice, have plans available. So it's not an easy build, but at least you would have curves and templates and dimensions and things of that nature to fit a standard. This is a 31-inch or 30-inch Vista window. I just want to say a big thanks to Kerf for providing the CNC. I put a link in the description so you guys can go check that out. They actually have a new version out now that is the bigger Pro machine, which you might want to go see. I use my little one all the time for jigs and little things that I need in furniture making, so I've really enjoyed having it. So thanks to them for providing that for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm almost there. I appreciate any advice, comments. I know there's a lot of you who know more about sheet metal work than I do that are watching this. So let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on how we can make this slide just a little bit easier, not quite as much binding going on. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.